Coming to you live, but not really. It is all pomp and no circumstance with Writer Richards on LetUsThinkAboutIt.com, the amateur hour you should never tune into.
Welcome back. After talking with my sister and re-listening to the last podcast, I realized I really missed many points I wanted to make. So this is a one-shot write and record. Happened pretty quickly this afternoon. Let me know if you like it. I can do more like this. Maybe. I don't know. This episode is really kind of only inspired by camouflage, even though that's in the title. It's really a way to expound on some more ideas, really about the complexity of camouflage and abstraction and living in a society full of it, because we did not really fully submerge to get under the skin of camo. Now, this is precisely because camo is shallow, it is surface, and it's also widespread. It's like a rhizome in that way. And as such, it disguises the core, really the intent, as it were. Now, intent is important, and I can't believe I have to say something like this, but to intend harm is, of course, different than accidentally blundering into idiocy. So what happens is we operate in a world through a trust bias. If you are, say, skeptical of absolutely everything, well, then you really can't survive or make forward progress in the world. So, yeah, as a human species, we tend to default towards trust. It's a better survival strategy. Now, camouflage, or a costume, this mimics the authentic surroundings. That is, it mimics trust. Logically, that means a tremendous percentage of our surroundings must actually be precisely what they are, or camouflage would not work at all. We wouldn't trust anything, therefore camouflage would be see-through. Now, the recognition of the world as a stable entity, something that functions as it appears, this stability is precisely what allows us to move forward in the world. Now, when this stability is put into doubt repeatedly, say by the intensification or proliferation of camouflage tactics, which are, of course, dissembling, dazzling, and obfuscating, or basically deception, we are left with a trust deficiency. And of course, as you know, when you don't trust or fit in, it leads to anxiety and suspicion, which cranks up depression and paranoia. Now, in this state of depressed, anxious paranoia, we are more susceptible to many kinds of manipulations. And that's because at a core level, we want our security back. We want trust. And under intense pressures and consternation, we will often sacrifice logic for the emotional security. Now, once again, welcome back for this short, shallow investigation into the superficial as profound. Part 1. The Servant Master. My sister yesterday told me this story, and it's sort of a Buddhist story about how to become low like water and yet remain sort of powerful in your humility. And it made me start thinking about water as ubiquitous, and therefore it's kind of banal. But it also has the power to carve the Grand Canyon or split stones. And of course, we learned all this in elementary school. And so we can say that water is super duper powerful and yet also so humble. And this is a little biblical in that whoever humbles himself shall be exalted. It's power through humility. And this is that verse is from Luke or something like that. Now, this can all feel true, but also feel trite. Yet in the context of camouflage, this tactic of really playing the gentle servant who gradually wears down mountains, yeah, that kind of feels like another disguise, right? Like it's just a super long con. And of course, this is the opposite of like torture techniques here, right? This is not waterboarding. It's more like Chinese water torture, but you're doing it the whole time with a smile on your face. So this is chiseling, right? And some people are just chiselers and they're smiling the whole time. They're picking at you. So Slavoj Žižek, he gave a talk recently on authority. And this was a master as servant talk he gave. And at one point, we had masters who were masters. The master was the authority. That is, the master said, do this, do that, because I said to do it. And that's a very straightforward means of authority. But what happened is we started beheading those people, right? So power went into hiding. And now we've switched to wanting masters who say things like, they will serve us. And once again, it's biblical. I will lower myself and humbly serve at your request as a representative tool of your will. I will don the garb of leader or the costume of the Communist Party or Red Party or whatever you need me to be, and I will humbly enact the will of the people through the state, somehow rising in power, while professing my actions are all for others. I am sacrificing here. I am a martyr. Now, the contradiction in here is, of course, the servant master, who appears to give all of himself. Well, this is kind of like the boss who tries to also be your best friend, or the parent who guilts you through weaponizing their sacrifices on your behalf, which, of course, you never asked for. Now, Zizek's famous story is that the authority, or the father, who tells you to go to your grandmother's house, well, at least this father, this authority figure, doesn't tell you how to feel about it. So you can secretly hate it, or secretly love it, or you can get over it, but you don't have to share any of it. What's worse is the parent who says you must go, and you must want to go, and you must want to feel good about it too, right? I mean, this is much more repressive. So on the way to our grandmother's, right, we were crossing this river and we realized that we have somehow been undermined. We have been eroded, our foundations. In the most pernicious way, our feelings are now illegitimate. You can't feel what you're feeling. And this must mean that your core self is flawed. So in this case, we must now manufacture or disguise a way to hide our shame. We must camouflage it. Perhaps, we too, in turn, from learning from this experience, become chiselers as well. But we're going to be these really soft and slow, kind. We're going to be like water, right? We're going to gurgle and we're going to be enjoyable and we'll make people feel good. But somehow, over time, these people are going to dissolve us, our very self, our foundation, while appearing to aid us. Part 2. Sex and Landscape. Now, in a more complex fashion, of course, we can consider the ubiquity of something, its repetition, its widespreadness, as a type of camouflage. Just being dispersed works. Marylin Monroe, of course, became a sex symbol, and the power of her image expands her persona until eventually her persona is on repeat. As herself is made somehow through media, of course, she is initially portrayed, and inaccurately, as the dumb blonde sex object. Now, the image of her is constructed, it's artificial, even her name isn't Marylin Monroe. This is an artificial costume that has real-world consequences. Overdosing at age 37, her image actually kept living on, as it was always in some way separate from the person. It was a symbol of sex, of beauty, and a bygone era. It was also ubiquitous. Now, Warhol used this image, who was really kind of no longer a person. This was an idea of the media, by the media, on perpetual repeat, of course, at scale. It's worldwide. Now, the repetition both strips aura through Walter Benjamin, but the aura is stripped out through its ubiquity, right? Through access to it. But oddly enough, this still empowers it. It maybe empowers it more because our trust bias becomes affected by it. This star ends up becoming the very context in which we survive, and therefore, seeing it on repeat, we trust it. Now, this is societal normalization. It's both bigger than life and dispersed throughout the world. Now, if we go into guys like J.G. Ballard, the billboard of the face or body actually mimics the landscape, the curve of the hip or the philtrum crashing into the upper lip. This becomes the valley and ravines carved by flash floods. This is the body as somehow dispersed and the curves of the hills as sexual, right? This is landscape as sex, as body, and it all is just too big and we have to accept it. Now, this type of camouflage, this larger than life made common, will not allow the person themselves to be seen, right? The core of the individual is safely guarded by the projection at scale. So you can dazzle and obfuscate, yet hide in plain sight. Now, as well, what happens is our libido gets involved in shaping this camouflage. And as Ballard writes on it in, say, the Atrocity Exhibition or Crash, desire has actually become decentralized. It's spread away from the human into the surroundings, the landscape, and objects themselves. So we don't see people anymore, but instead the commodified object as a desire to be obtained. And our way to relate or show appreciation, we don't know how else to do it but to fuck the object. So desire culminates in and is reduced to the sexual act. Now, without a person attached, but only the floating abstracted idea of the person as a symbol, maybe not even a person anymore, not really Marylin anymore, we have a libido completely detached from the real. And it's a need of fixation, right? In some version, fixity. And what happens is we end up settling for a real act to try to make it real, whatever that is. Now, this might all sound a little complex, but as we learned, the production of mimetic desire, especially through the media, it provides the image for us to crave, for us to want. And we have this tendency to want to make the image form, according to Benjamin Bratton, real. And this is not only in our consumption, but in consummation. Okay, let's tie this back real quick. So let's get into camouflaging as a tactic amidst this kind of soluble world of free-floating symbols. Now, this dissolution of the self, this renders the body of the other as simultaneously object and landscape, right? When it's widespread like this. It's both kind of like fuckable as an object, and yet it's kind of nebulously pervasive context. It's the background of all things. Now, this kind of attenuation, it really separates libido from knowing. Knowing is not intellectual curiosity in pursuit of the sort of essence or core of desire here, which we really don't want to look at too closely, but it is reduced to this kind of euphemism of to know, which is biblical again, right? In the biblical sense, this is carnal knowledge. Essentially, all knowledge, all knowing, at this reduced form, comes through sex. An act with the object is how you know it. And yet, of course, this is a shallow reduction, right? Where all relations, even to objects and landscape, become carnal in this very reductive aspect. So to chase knowledge is to fuck. And we become unable to satisfy or produce a thicker, more compelling, deeper connection that can satiate craving. Now, in such a way, our craving, of course, persistently biological and the basis of our identification, insists on fulfillment, right? That's what we do. We fulfill our desires, our cravings. After all, how do we know ourselves other than what we crave to consume? But let's circle back here too. More importantly, this is all camo through subject context confusion or dispersal at scale. Now, this decentralization of the self, this means that there can really be no core to be found. This is the rhizome again. Interestingly, Mark Fisher, writing on Ballard, he points out that this does not diminish our trauma, though. You would think decentralizing everything would diminish it, this kind of dispersal. But perhaps because the external is so dispersed and actually unfulfilling to us, we turn inwards to our pain, which is a very real thing, before projecting back out. We fixate on our pain and we put our trauma on repeat. So this is just like Warhol's Marylin Monroe heads on repeat. We aggrandize and mine our pain repetitively, making it more real. This becomes the site of the crash we revisit as the predominant means of getting off. Though, of course, naturally, we would try to deny that. Now, the crux of all this is, we cannot escape ourselves in a world where nothing is fixed or authentic. Now, we are driven as creatures internally. And yet, to protect ourselves, we camouflage externally. Now, returning to the last episode, we talked about the hunter. The camouflage of the hunter blends them with nature, which is a dissolution or dissolving of the self into your surroundings, into your context. The individual disappears intentionally. They lose the self. Now, they do this to learn invisibility for maybe hiding, but it's usually for a forthcoming attack. And with this kind of skill that you have honed and tuned into out in nature, well, how does this map back onto civilization? And how does it map onto digital media? Well, to disappear, there is a piece called To Disappear Completely by Hito Stirl. And what happens in there is that you can vanish, but why do you vanish? Is this so that you can produce then the threat of attack? Or that you can somehow reintroduce agency through disappearance? Because to disappear is to dissolve the self into your context. And this actually opens possibilities for you because it's a refusal of the current context. And yet, Everyone else is just going to see it as a threat. It might also be the only way that you can gain enough distance to learn yourself, which is to unwind from mimetic desire and, of course, our mediated sex that's driving us. But then again, more than likely, this disguise is precisely the facade that can also shelter incipient psychopathic death dealers. So we got to be careful here. Part 3. So finally, okay, we brought up the digital world and civilization, right? We can address the new. So the digital and the travails of insecurity amidst all people in corporations is because they're all practicing camouflage in various ways. It's all marketing, right? It is surface level stuff. And in such a world, we cease to really have a real. And that means there can be no trust when you don't know what's real. So oddly enough, that could be argued, but let's just say that nothing is what it seems. So the paranoia here is healthy. We're in a time of fakery and phonies, and people can't tell the difference between things like an AI doctored photo of the Pope and an actual photo of the Pope. And of course, AI is making things like arguments that somebody's wrong, and they can reference an article to point out that the person is wrong, and then you go look it up, but the article doesn't exist. Also, AI has been found accusing a professor of sexual misconduct, and it cited a time that he was in Alaska, even though the professor never visited Alaska with his students, right? So this is wild. So this misdirection by AI that's trying to help us and yet is breaking down trust. So our systems that we have used here in the digital world to establish trust, such as things like crowdsourcing Wikipedia with moderators. Well, this has now become a battleground. Wikipedia is a battleground over the word recession and what that means. And we're not even going to get into the hot button topics here. This should be a pretty commonly defined word. Now, the digital world, originally through its transparency and access, it promised, let's say, a more nuanced version of facts and truth. And yet, of course, it has now delivered the opposite. We no longer trust the image or experts or science, maybe not even math, but we definitely don't trust the news. People like Matthew Crawford, he talks about the attention economy, how really we cannot self-govern if big data and supercomputers manipulate our attention because they're just smarter than us and they can hack our evolutionary impulses. And yet all of this came from us wanting a techno-utopia. Now, to save this techno-utopia, which we so long desired and gave us so many great things, people are now inventing blockchain and crypto. And this is to reinstill or reinstall trust in a runaway system of illusions and desires. Yet, I would argue that trust is already gone and has been gone. The horse is out of the barn. So we have only attention, as of course demoralized as it is. It's of course also incepted with lies and mimetic desires. I mean, even the images that we purchase and consume and copulate with, we don't even believe those, but we do it anyway. Now, on a national level, though, how do we think about this, right? Like this destabilization, this lack of trust in the current government, in any expert, right? This is actually an old-fashioned security tactic that we used to use against foreign governments to introduce a puppet regime rather than the autonomous one that had the ability to excise the cancer, which of course at the time was us or capitalism. Now, cancer is a unique example here in that it fights back against you by saying it is indeed part of you. Like capitalism says it's part of your desires. Now, it's almost undifferentiated from your healthy DNA. Your body actually trusts it immunologically because it is of you at some point, right? It has some of the right markers and passcodes, but it's kind of confused. And yet this camouflaged parasite is, of course, mortally harmful. Now, what happens here is if your attention is hacked, getting back to this, if you're distracted and captured, if you're fed images of billboard-sized, sexualized items, I mean, these aren't just people, but maybe they're cars or vacations, but whatever it is, if it's American, it's us. Now, perhaps this is even pictured through like a lust for the outdoors, America's forests. And this can permeate your Instagram feed, right? And the idea is, do you still have the power to focus, or do you just need to act? Do you just need to go be American, get yourself into nature, fornicate with some pine trees? Like, what do you need to do? Have you been so thoroughly sort of dazzled, so buffaloed with obfuscatory claims and your warped desires that you have lost your ability to truly focus? Like, who are you? Are you even the type of person that goes into nature? Instead, we just end up making decisions instead of spending time discerning. Now, focus is the only thing that can allow us to determine who we are and how we react, giving us the power to shape our world. Now, in a society of all camouflage, where it's all surface and very little substance, a society where we cheer because of ideology or political stance, not because of any greatness that's there, well, all of a sudden, reality doesn't line up with the affect, and we have no trusted path forward. There's no longer really a way to know the forest for the trees without any trust that those are indeed trees. Now, our only way to shape our world becomes to react with these strategies that we have at hand, such as like hunkering down, trying to hide, to camouflage. And of course, when threatened, we gotta dazzle or obfuscate. We gotta dodge, duck, weave. And of course, maybe while you're hiding here, right? You don't need to just sit there and dive totally into radical vulnerability or something. But yeah, maybe figure your shit out, right? The only way we're going to actually make it through this loss of trust in experts and digital tech is to somehow reestablish trust between people. Ugh, that just sounds like the worst. People are so gross. Oh, all right. Well, thank you very much. This was very much a quick episode, but addressed some of the more profound implications of a society that's overly impressed with camouflage tactics and it's claiming overly complicated cleverness as necessary for survival, when of course we also have plenty of examples of proof that robust, complex systems can exist without deceit. So if you enjoyed the show, please give me a like, a review. I don't know, it helps immensely also if you share this with a friend. Now, if you want to help out financially, because of course I always need it, please go to letusthinkaboutit.com. And until next time, this is Ryder Richards. Hunker down and live dangerously.